You're listening to the Gutsy Podcast, where we talk about all things real, raw, and ridiculous about running a business authentically. I'm Laura Wallace, also known as the Laura Aura, lover of all things inspirational, owner of Works Graphic Design, and your host on this journey through entrepreneurship. I'm here to help you get out of your head and back into action as a passionate business rock star. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday as we fuel your gutsy. Oh, girls and guys, you are a high achiever. You want so much more out of life than what I would consider the average human. You want more money, more time, energy, satisfaction. You have a higher calling to you, but you hit a ceiling and you're tired and maybe you're not getting the results and you find yourself spinning the same damn wheels over and over again. If this is resonating with you, today's episode is going to hit a lot of notes because I'm super excited to have Shauna VanBogart, who's going to talk about the framework for optimal operation in your business. Shauna is a speaker and business coach for high-performing entrepreneurs. She's worked in the field of transformation and business strategy for over a decade, helping hundreds of business owners just like you get out of their own way. Shauna and her husband live downtown Charleston and are probably best known for their one-year stint of living on, wait for it, a boat in Charleston Harbor. And they were featured on Tiny House Hunting, which I find fascinating. They travel when possible, and even though they really want to learn how to play tennis, apparently they are currently failing miserable at trying to do so. Shauna, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, this is going to be a phenomenal conversation. So I first want to give our listeners just a brief history because you and I have crossed paths in the past.
We have. Yeah, we have.
So when you were running Best Kept Self, I remember I had a teammate that got an email from you and you were looking for writers and contributors. And she's like, hey, I think this would be perfect for you. And I submitted on your website thinking that I probably wouldn't hear back from anyone. And I heard back from you. And so I wrote on your blog for a while, which is a cool story.
Yeah. And that feels like another lifetime almost. But that Best Kept Self was a really beautiful evolutionary moment to where I am now. So that platform is sort of idle at the moment. It's not an active pursuit of mine, but it's connected me to so many wonderful people like you.
It's amazing the steps and the journeys that we go through and what once served us, knowing and recognizing when a change is needed. So what I'm most curious about is what called you to change and transform and transition from Best Kept Self?
So Best Kept Self was an evolution from the previous place that I was at. As you mentioned, I've been in the field of transformation since 2007, where I came in as an image consultant. So I was working with people individually on their appearance, behavior, communication, to use those built-in tools and leverage those to get things that they wanted in their life, whether it was a promotion or, a recently divorced man who never dressed himself and is back in the dating scene, or an entrepreneur who needed to feel more confident and effective at networking and selling. So that was where I entered into this field. And when I started working with clients and they embark on a transformation like that, it's addicting, as you probably know in your own life. And you want to start transforming the other areas, and everything's intrinsically linked, right? And so over the years, I had cultivated all these connections with, wellness coaches and makeup artists and mom coaches and all of these people, and sort of became like this go-to Rolodex for transformation of the connections that I had. So it was a necessary rebrand to move into Best Kept Self, which was a bigger umbrella of not just image consulting, but was this self-care exclusively for the entrepreneurial market, because that is sort of where my clients started to pool. And the intention of Best Kept Self was sort of to be this one-stop shop of transformation experts in a variety of fields, but it very quickly became this online editorial magazine, which was completely unexpected. I also went into the mode of operation with that business completely differently than I did my my previous brand, which was under my name. It was Mackenzie Image Consulting. So I kind of went into it going, you know what? I'm going to actually use this as a moment to surrender. And it was my first, I would say, deliberate, intentional act of surrendering control and allowing the business to become something that I didn't need to see the end result of. So it was very purposeful in that. And as it evolved, what it helped me understand about my own skill sets and my zone of genius is that I'm actually not meant to be behind the scenes. And as beautiful as this online magazine and all the contributors, I mean, it was a big platform, as beautiful as it was, and for, it seemingly working in the ways that it needed to work, I was actually, I wouldn't go as far as to say I was unfulfilled, but something just wasn't right with it for me. And I felt ethically that if I was going to be leading a team, and especially if I was going to be engaging contributors, ethically, if I have one foot in and one foot out, I just didn't feel okay with that. Even if I could manage it, which I was, it was easily manageable. I just didn't feel okay with that. I felt like maybe I was misrepresenting or misleading people. So for me, I kind of had to take another intentional moment in my career to step back and go, what clarity do I now have with this experience behind my belt, under my belt? What all can I cultivate, data harvest from this experience of this project into what I'm really wanting for myself now? What's that next evolution? And so that's what, that led to, which is where I'm here now.
Yeah. And I think that you said something so beautiful in there about surrendering to the business. I mean, that really just hit a chord for me, because I think a lot of times we as the owners can sometimes be the very reason that we don't get to where we want to be or where the business could actually go, for a myriad of reasons.
I would argue that's the number one reason we don't
get
it.
Yeah.
like not even a little bit, like by far the number one reason you don't get results in your business is where the business owner is at. And really for me, and there's many things that we get in our own way over, but the first pivot into best kept self should have probably happened much sooner. The reason it didn't is because you start business with this purity of a vision. And I think the first year in business is one of the easiest, in my opinion, because you actually don't have all these, you don't have enough, you don't know what you don't know that first year in business. So there's this like purity to it, and you have all this momentum, and you are starting it still within the passion of the work, but you evolve. And so when you evolve, we have to make sure we bring the business up to speed. As I like to say, if you don't bring the business up to speed, you end up several years later into your venture and you're wearing a business a size or two too small. And that's what happened with my original consultancy. I was so determined to follow through on the original vision, because all we hear is discipline and follow through and be persistent, that it literally did become Einstein's definition of insanity. Like I was clutching to the vision because it was more important to me to be a person who follows through, and yet sacrificing basically my soul in a way.
Yeah, I believe that. And with that whole 1 foot in, 1 foot out, it's hard. It's hard when half of your body and mind is operating or moving towards the way that you want to be, while there's another whole part of you that's either stuck or resistant, not able to move forward. And it's literally physically and mentally exhausting. And I think that that's where a lot of business challenge stems from too, is just being torn, knowing that you want to be something, but for whatever reason you haven't been able to make that change or leap.
Totally. And I think one of the big confusion points in that is, by default, I think we inherently ask the question, what am I doing wrong? And gosh, that can spiral into a thought cloud of so many other negative feelings and emotions. And we get into self-worth, and we get into this force of we need to figure it out because we need to prove something to ourselves and perhaps to other people. And where I finally got the clarity that allowed me to move into a space of momentum to make the necessary pivots I needed to, it wasn't until I got this clarity. It was realizing I'm not doing anything wrong. I've evolved. And so looking at it instead of this like bashing myself that I can't figure it out, which again, I really think inherently that's just by default where we go. It was going, what if it's not that? What if it's not that I did anything wrong? What if it's that I can't, what if it's that I can't not figure it out? What if it's more, I've surpassed this. I've risen above this. I've evolved as a person. And now I need to take, again, the data that I've harvested from this experience and realize that the true intent was not to necessarily scale that business. The true intent was to use that as a stepping stone to something else.
Oh, and that's such a beautiful moment when that realization comes into play. And I try my hardest now because awareness has become such a huge part of my life, is anytime, even when something is challenging or people that I meet or places that I go, I will often step back and just say, I am living a chapter of my life right now that's going to this is going to contribute to something later. Because every path that's crossed, every person that you meet, every email that you're sending, it's all building towards, it's very purposeful in that moment.
Yeah. And I think another way to put this for people that are sort of overhearing the quote about, life is a journey. Because, when that was said to me during some of my low moments, I'm like, yeah, like whatever. I don't need to hear that. But the better way that I like to frame it is a life of infinite destinations rather than a journey. Because a journey sort of insinuates it's never ending work. And sometimes when you're facing this resistance, like hearing that is just like you want to punch someone in the face,
Yeah.
When you look at it and reframe it as, infinite destinations, it's unlimited destinations. That was a destination I arrived at. That sort of feels like a completion of sorts. I can move on to a different destination now.
I love that. So I'm curious about that kind of, I feel like you probably went through a deep transformation yourself and that reflection and releasing and surrendering to, what, this is no longer serving me. I need to do something different. I think a lot of people get hung up in that and feeling like, oh, that's a failure now, or I didn't do something right, or this was wasted time. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your process in that transformation before launching your consulting business now.
So just so I'm clear, so I answer it accurately, the question on the table is, when it appears like things are not working, what did I actually do? Like in that moment?
Yeah, so I think it's very easy to think, oh, this is no longer working and I want to make a change, but immediately I feel like I have failed at something.
Yeah. I have always, this is sort of an annual practice of mine now because of stalling myself up by not knowing this. So to stay on top of it, first of all, we have to realize that we are always in motion. We are always growing and moving. And so that means that our values, our mission, our purpose, like evolves slightly or dramatically along with that. So what I've done in those moments, especially that very first moment where I really was down on myself, is I sat with a sheet of paper, and I don't know where these questions came from, but I sat with a sheet of paper and I asked myself a handful of questions that this has become the annual practice of mine. And the first question I start with is, what is it currently that I still love to do within my business? And on the granular, like the really small things, like what are the things that I really, really love to do? The next question that I go to, and mind you, in that, like, it wasn't even necessarily the image consulting services. It was a lot of like, I really enjoyed learning WordPress. I really enjoyed that at the time. I really enjoyed getting on the back end and having that experience of learning coding, so it was really specific. The next question I moved into was, what am I really good at? Which is really different than what do you love? And so what am I really good at, as I would say, and as other people would say? And then I spelled that out. And then the last question was, who do I really love to engage with, ideally? So what that exercise, and then the very, very last question, once you have those three done, the very last question was, now what does this all mean? Because ideally, when you answer those three questions, and especially when you see it on paper, the formula, as I see it, is to do what I love, do things I'm inherently good at, channel them in a space of people that I immensely enjoy working with. And that to me is the definition of success. And so if I could see that down on paper, I could, again, it's that data harvesting. I could pull from the current experience and everything that's happened up until that moment to then go, okay, what does this mean? This means more of these things, and let's let the other things go. So then you move into a phase of massive editing and purging. And the question that I continue to come back to is what earns its spot in my life and what earns its spot in my business. So instead of like taking everything in and then sifting through it, I don't let anything in until they pass through some filters, because, I don't want to be back in the same situation that I was in. So, you cultivate discernment in that moment, and you bring a bit of selfishness back to it. Because how am I serving anyone showing up in a business that, sure, like it's decently successful? It's not that it was necessarily failing, but it certainly was not doing what it needed to do. But how is that helpful to anyone if I don't take an active, positively selfish approach to it?
Yeah, I feel like I can't write fast enough. This is amazing stuff, because I love how it's turning what I feel like just knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is, this is no longer serving me, so clearly that means that I messed up something.
Yeah.
And this is really turning that on its head and saying, okay, let's use this time and experience as something productive, and how do we now evolve that? So these questions are very bite-sized to be able to like funnel that information to say, okay, what is next? How do I proceed? And sometimes the season that people are in, it is right and the business is right, but sometimes things just need filtered, right? Like delegation is a beautiful freaking thing. And getting bogged down by doing too many things that you shouldn't be doing. Like, what am I really good at? I think it's important to know like what you're good at, but then what are you amazing at?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's on a spectrum. But here's the clarity that I got with the delegation thing, because we throw around that word, and yes, it's absolutely important, and I'm fully on board that train. But I think there was this culture, at least for a time period, and I don't know if it still exists because I'm just not in those conversations as much. But, if I would say like 5 to 7 years ago, kind of like after Tim Ferriss came out with 4-Hour Work Week. I mean, what happened when that book came out. Like everyone was like, delegate everything away, and you're not successful unless you delegate. Like delegation was propped up on this big, what am I trying to say? On a pedestal.
Like a pedestal.
There we go. There's that word. Propped up on this pedestal, and it was almost like you weren't cool unless you drank a ton of coffee and hustled and delegated everything. Right. So like I created this vision in my mind that that's what a successful entrepreneur looks like, is delegation. And when I sat down and did that exercise of what do I love, the website's a perfect example. That is outside and I don't do that now, but in that moment, that is outside, the service offering of image consulting. Certainly that is something on the back end. Someone might come in and say, you shouldn't be doing that. But that activity gave me so much joy. It energized me. So when I would sit down with someone, and if they answer these questions, I would say, keep that as yours. No, it doesn't make any logical sense for you to be doing it. But if you don't prioritize energizing activities in your week, so I'm looking at energy management versus time management, then no, you will never be able to ride the momentum and the momentum of that wave of energy you get from doing enjoyable tasks that will lead to the results that you need. So we have to be careful with delegation. We have to own it for ourselves and keep the things that really do provide us with that like joyful energy, even if it doesn't make sense to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, because I'm just sitting here thinking, there's a handful of things that, I could probably very easily delegate, and they may even be silly or simple or whatever, but, they give me a bit of a mental break between some of the more intense things that I love to do.
Yeah.
So just because, you don't have to delegate everything, it's the things that are like daunting or draining. And again, going back to what you were just saying about energy management, if you're doing things that are like soul sucking to you, those are the things to really evaluate. Like, okay, do I need someone to work with me on this, or to take this off my plate versus, I mean, it's something simple, but emptying the dishwasher. Of course, we could have help doing that kind of stuff, right? But it's mind numbing, and I don't mind doing it, and I like contributing, and it's just, as owners, we do a lot of different things. So I think it's just understanding the things that fuel you versus drain you.
Absolutely. And so that would be a really wonderful exercise to start with. Just pull out a sheet of paper, and you could start with just putting everything down, like brain dump everything that you do within your business down to the micro tasks, and then organize it in a flow of like if energy was on a battery, right? What are the things that fill it and what are the things that completely drain it? And just map that out for yourself. There you go. There's your delegation plan.
Just like that.
Just like that.
just that easy. So you're working with high achievers, and I can attest to this because when I was reading through your website, I was like, well, she's kind of talking to me. You're talking to high achievers. So these people have hit ceilings with time or money or energy. What are some of the common things that you are recognizing? Like, why are these people so important for you to work with?
I love achievers because they're doers, they're ambitious, they like to get after it. It feels good to win, whether that's, like in competition with yourself or others, like there's a fire there. And the other thing I would classify, not with all achievers, but what I found is a commonality between a lot of the clients and the audience members that I work with is that people are achievers for a reason. Something's happened, right? Like something's happened in their life where perhaps they've overcome some trauma or, maybe even abuse, or they've gone through some hardship. And that achievement is a way to tap into themselves and sort of have ownership over themselves. Again, not all achievers are like that or have gone through something like that, but I find a commonality, like there's a reason that achievement exists. And I know that part of my journey as I, data harvested all these experiences and I reflect on them and I go, okay, what do I want to take with me to this next phase is basically the question I'm asking. What do I want to take with me whenever I hit sort of a ceiling? And I ask those questions of myself that I've already outlined to you. The more I've embarked on my journey, the more I've discovered, okay, there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing for the sole reason to just achieve, which means to win or figure it out. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. I think small wins and wins in general are incredibly energetic and they carry a lot of momentum for other things. But for sustainable growth and impact and results, we have to have a deeper intent, which should be impact. And I don't think achievement and impact are in conflict, but I do see a lot of people that are running their business, myself included in the past, where I was doing it because my motivation was to achieve. And a lot of that achieving was tied up in proving something to myself and proving something perhaps to other people without even knowing it, totally subconscious, completely subconscious. And when I step back to go, why am I doing this? Why is it so important for me to have media mentions? Why is it so important for me to achieve business awards? Why is it so important for me to hit, $500,000 in revenue? Like, what is really behind that? And what I found was behind that was coming from a place of when I'm talking like when you shed all the layers away, it's coming from a place of fear and coming from a place of needing to prove something. Once I got clear on like, okay, I'm achieving, like all I'm doing is basically achieving. And when you're in a sort of what I would classify myself as in an achievement addiction, you achieve and you get the high off of it, but then it's this, and listeners can maybe like use this as a way to check in with themselves to see if they have these symptoms. You like achieve and then you're deflated not that much longer. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be a month later, but like you're back to a place of like unfulfillment or like feeling like you're missing something. It's not sustainable. The energy that came from it's not sustainable. So then you need another achievement to go after. So then your motivation for your business is personal achievement. You're making your business all about you, which I know might sound like it's in conflict with the selfishness conversation we had, but your business in the grand scheme of things should be there for impact. So if you realize like, okay, I'm just skipping from achievement high to achievement high to achievement high. And what some people will end up doing, which they don't even realize, again, all subconscious, is they end up creating things like creating problems or creating ventures for the sole reason to achieve, because they don't even realize this dynamic is at play. So then they just keep hopping and hopping and hopping and hopping, and nothing's sustainable, and they keep returning to the same place again, and those achievements can become more and more intense. So when we ask ourselves, am I doing this because ultimately it feels really good to have impact, or am I doing this because I want to win and I just simply want to achieve? Just realize for yourself that the impact's going to carry the sustainable results you're looking for, and the achievement is going to be a temporary means to maybe gain some energy.
Yeah. Wow. So
I know that was a lot.
No, it's perfect, because achievement addiction, I think, is a real thing. And like you said, it oftentimes is tied back to the need to prove something to someone in your life, whether that was when you were 3 or 13 or 30, whenever, something may have impacted your life that makes you feel like you're not enough, which makes you feel like you need to achieve to prove yourself, which ultimately creates this really mentally and physically draining cycle. I mean, when you're in that cycle, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Because the race to get to the achievement high is intense, and then it happens. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like even when you achieve, it's not even like, it doesn't even feel like a big celebration. It's not like a take time and really like bask in it and look at the level that I've gotten to. It's like, okay, I got it. All right, what's next?
It's like law of diminishing returns. That first piece of chocolate, for me, it would be dark chocolate with sea salt and caramel, is fantastic. But every bite after that is less and less, it's still good, but it's not as amazing as that first bite. And so it's the same thing with achievement. Like, sure, you get a little bit off of it, but it's kind of empty, becomes sort of like empty calories. So then like you're literally just going through motions, which is exhausting, like you said, both mentally and physically, and it's highly, highly unproductive. So part of, moving into best kept self, that was intentional. That was exactly where I needed to move. And that served the beautiful purpose, of taking me to the next place. But toward the end, I realized, okay, I am now kind of doing the same thing I was before, but I'm not going to stay in it as long, where I'm holding on to it because, I need to follow through when, okay, I hit the achievement, I did it, but it didn't give me the satisfaction that I hoped for. Like, it hit some major milestones and had some clout to it that I think I would be really excited about, but instead I actually was left feeling kind of more empty because in the process of achieving, I actually was moving further and further away from who I really am.
That's so true. I mean, you lose sight of the why, right? Like why you even started this to begin with, the purpose. What are some ways that you typically help guide people from that need for achieving to really being more in an impact state of mind?
We start with the why, where you just pivoted us to, which is perfect because I find, and maybe this is just my experience with it, when people would say, and this is touted everywhere, be in service, be in impact, it wasn't landing with me. Like, and it wasn't, I'm consider myself a good person. I consider myself to deliver like great services and have impact. But for whatever reason, like I would hear that and I would cognitively understand that, but I was like, it wasn't landing with me. And so when I went down this journey, looking back, I was like, oh, I was trying to return to impact. What it felt like and what I was cognizant of is I was trying to return to my why. Why did I get into, let's go even all the way back to 2007. Why did I start? And what I find for most people is that theme kind of remains constant. The vehicles you might move in and out of. So for me, going all the way back, it was transformation, which is a huge umbrella, but the theme is the same. And so I moved in all these different vehicles and it's like, okay, return to the theme of transformation. Now with everything under my belt and everything I've experienced and all these beautiful projects and collaborations I've been a part of, what were those peak moments? And if you don't have those, our childhood and the projects and the things we were involved with also can help us get to that as well. And so I started then collecting like a puzzle piece. Okay, I really love connecting with people. And mind you, I looked outside of my business. So as I looked for my why, which in my opinion is hand in hand with impact, I realized outside of my business, ever since I can remember, I have been the go-to person for advice and insight from basically all of my friends. And I love that. I love being that person. I also started to recognize in my personal life, I was involved in a lot of nonprofit work and board of directors where I was put in positions to be an advisor and a teacher. And so I thought, okay, why am I putting these in separate buckets? Like, why have I gotten away from that connection and that one-on-one service that I clearly get immense satisfaction from outside of my business? Why am I not bringing that back as part of my purpose and as part of my operation mode? So again, it was a massive period of reflection. And I find without fail, it often takes a mediator or a coach or a mentor. That data and those answers already exist. They already exist. We just need someone to help you sort through them. And sometimes we're way too close to ourselves to see it. And mind you, at this time period, I also had a lot of people in my ear going, Shauna, you're so good at coaching. Shauna, you're so good at giving advice. Shauna, you always just seem to know the answer. So again, like it took people outside of me to tell me who I was. And we have to be eyes and ears open to really see and hear that.
Yeah, and that's the key point is when if you hear it once, it's okay, it is what it is. You hear it twice. But when it's like this ongoing theme, when people continue to approach you and are giving you the same feedback and are having the same feeling from interacting with you, and those people don't have any interaction together, it's the universe being like, hey, hello, wake up, girl. I'm trying to tell you something, but I need you to listen. I find that those voices get louder and louder and louder and louder until it's practically like screaming in your face. And then sometimes there's like this impact of, oh shit, there it is. How have I not seen it? And then when you look back, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been told this my whole life. I've been told this for the last decade. This is just really who I am. So it's really all about being aware of those things, the surroundings, the tone, the words people are saying to you, and then being open to receiving it.
Totally. And there's a couple points in that. First, we have to be in a space where we are not in constant doing to be able to hear that. So if you don't feel like you are getting those signs, they're there. I want to like remind anyone or validate anyone who's listening, they're there. But have you slowed down enough? Have you taken a pause to actually really hear them? So you got to be able to be in a state to be eyes and ears open. The second piece of that, though, is all those things are being said to me. Innately, again, as humans, we overcomplicate things.
Yes.
It wasn't until, so if I didn't work with an actual professional who is a coach or a professional in something like transformation or habit behavior or things like that, if I didn't work with someone like that, I would have taken all those things in. And then the achiever, who was the bigger identity of me, versus the impact person, that identity I had cultivated to be much larger and my motivation point, that would have overridden it and probably morphed it into something that was more inauthenticity. So it was the simple question of a coach who said to me, Shauna, what is being said to you? Like kind of what the conversation we're having now. What is being said? What is the pattern? What work is showing up? And, to pose that question and sit with it sounds so incredibly simple, but then to curate, the real intention behind that an outsider who's a professional could see versus me running with it with my achiever identity and then creating more of the same.
Right. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I love the idea of like turning on the intention of being open to hearing it. You tapped into something that I definitely want. It really got my interest. Was that you said doing is not always the solution. No. So we by nature are doers, and it's very, very, very easy to get in the pattern of just cross it off the list, keep going, keep running, keep chugging, keep going along, and then you find yourself in this whole mix that we're talking about. So talk to me about the whole concept of being a doer.
I love this. This is like, I'm rubbing my hands together. It's like, let's get in there. Let's do this. So the doing is, hand in hand with achieving oftentimes. There's a lot of glorification on how much we can get done in that to-do list. And, even neurologically, checking things off a to-do list feels really good. Intention's a big role in that. The doing, and a lot of people could liken doing to, I don't know if, your audience would resonate with when people talk about like feminine traits and masculine traits. Those aren't terms that I use a lot, but doing is the masculine component, and we need both. We need both of those. But doing is necessary, but it's also important we understand when there's a season of receiving and there's a season of also, recovering, and we can liken it to an athlete. An athlete's not always performing. They spend a lot of time in rest. They spend a lot of time in just recovering. They spend a lot of time in between those moments of, like, the bulk of it is the in between performing. The performing, which is the doing, is incredibly intentional. So what I would say is missing right now, as I see it in business owners, is the act of receiving. So if we look at this as a linear model, we say, I want $500,000 in business, or I want to win this award. And we enter down this very linear sprint to get there. And the problem with looking at it as a sprint to get there, by then setting these very rigid goals with these big milestones and then this massive to-do list, is we leave no space for the creative inner guidance system to kick in, which provides us with our best ideas. And then also when we arrive at that destination of the $500,000, or at least we try to arrive at that, we are so burned out by the process of getting there that we either like collapse into recovery, or we're like move to the next thing on the list, which basically looks like coming back to the starting line, and then we sprint again to the next thing. What it really needs to look like is more circular and expansive, like a spiral that spirals out. And what it starts with is understanding it's not so much a question of what do I do to get to $500,000. It's a question of who do I need to be to get to $500,000. And when we start with who do I need to be, what we're putting out to life, higher self, energetically, is the end result. Meaning we have to be the $500,000 earner in order to get it. And that's a bit of there's a lot there, so we can digest that after I get through the model. But so if we understand, okay, who do I need to be? How does a $500,000 operate? How do they talk? How do they move in the world? What habits do they have? What are they committed to? What are their priorities? That inspires the more intentional doing that is actually going to allow us to create moments of receiving. The receiving is so important because instead of the linear model where we set a goal and then we run to it, the receiving in this more circular, expansive model looks like we hit the $500,000 or whatever milestone, and we take a moment to go to fully take it in. But the thing is, we already were there mentally and subconsciously because we started with being. So the receiving moment is more a moment of validation of, yep, this is who I am. So what that does is reinforces more abundant being. And again, it's like if you look at the spiral going out and out, it's the circular: being inspires doing, doing creates receiving, receiving reinforces being. So the question that we really need to ask is, who am I being? Because the other thing that gets thrown around a lot with doing is inspired action. I'm sure you've heard people say, take inspired action. And the reality is you're taking inspired action all the time. Everyone is. It comes back to who are you being that's inspiring that action. So when you look at your bank account and you don't have the amount of money in there that you wish, and let's say the first is coming up and you have bills to pay, who you're being in that moment is someone in an era of desperation. And I've been there in the past. And what happens when you're being a person in desperation? You inspire actions of desperate things. And then you start creating services and products and throwing spaghetti against the wall. There's no intent there. You're reacting to a being of desperation. What that does is create moments of receiving of lack, which reinforces more being of desperation. So it's almost like the spiral then goes inward, which will eventually hit a ceiling. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes so much sense. I love this stuff so much.
Yeah.
It makes so much, energy out is energy in, right? So someone once told me that, I was in a moment of really a season of challenge and just grabbing every straw that I could get onto. And she said, Laura, what's happening is you are you are receiving what you are putting out.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's a mirror. What is coming to you right now is a mirror of your energy that's putting out. So that moment reminds me of what you're talking about right now. And it's just about being super intentional and being aware in the moment. So that moment when you pull up like you mentioned, when you pull up the bank app and you see the negative, or you see the low balance, or, it's just not where you want it to be, immediately it's easy to go into like, oh shit mode, right? We start freaking out, and then we start panicking, and then we start overthinking, and then we start like scrounging for stuff.
Yep.
So what do you recommend in those moments to start transitioning some of those thoughts and feelings?
That one is hard to answer. The general answer is you need some sort of what I would call like a sacred practice, or your higher self, or a high-minded operation manual for yourself for those specific moments. One of my favorite books that is kind of the starter book I recommend to everyone is to read Busting Loose from the Money Game. It's out there. The book cover, as I've said on other, I hate the book cover. I would never have picked it up off a shelf. Unfortunately, being judgmental of the book cover, but that book is incredibly transformational, and it outlines a process for that specific moment that I think is a really wonderful starting point. And so the process in a nutshell is basically, okay, bring the emotion closer to you, which is like fear and scarcity and like, what did I do wrong? Like, don't try to bypass it, which is what a lot of us do. Oh, I don't like these feelings. Okay, bypass it, take the high road. Instead of that, bring it closer to you. And there's a whole, there's a build up to this process, and then tell the truth about it, which is and should be, I'm infinitely abundant. I am infinite possibility, if we want to get into quantum physics. So if I'm infinite possibility, there's really no reason to fret in this moment. We have to trust, step into the unknown. We don't need to micromanage or worry about how, and relax on it a little bit. And then a moment of receiving. And the moment of receiving, which some would say like, well, what is there to receive in that moment? The moment of receiving in the moment of seeing a bank account that puts you into scarcity is the opportunity to remind yourself of who you are, which is a really incredible moment of gratitude, to instead viewing that as a moment of like despair, viewing it as here's like a moment where I felt myself in despair, and the mere fact that I'm in despair means it's a cue to remind myself to ground back into the truth of who I really am. And that is a really beautiful moment to express gratitude for, because life is constantly trying to give us these cues through our experiences that serve as these sort of, jarring us alignment moments to align back to who we are. So to really bring this in, the example of when I was first stuck in my business, I spent most of my being in, I'm broken, I don't have the answers, I'm not good at this. That's what I was saying. That was the thought pattern. When I started to get a grasp on it, I moved into a being who instead was not in desperation, not having thoughts of I can't figure it out. It was, I've evolved. I'm beyond this. I've grown, which feels empowering. So now I've moved into an empowering reaction to the situation, which then inspired the actions and the questions, and like really weird and awesome stuff can come through when you move to an empowering response to a situation like that.
It absolutely can. And we were just talking earlier here in the office about when you're in alignment, the speed of things can
Holy cow.
I mean, it is almost unbelievable. Like, because it's like this resistance that you're putting up, right? Like the universe is giving you all these little pop quizzes. Hey, here we go. We're gonna try this out. We're gonna see if you're ready to transition. We're going to practice being who you really are. And in that moment, you get the decision whether I'm going to react the way that I would typically, or whether I'm going to change the way that I interact with the situation.
Yeah.
And then we go into, when you start really leaning in towards, okay, this is who I am, and you start believing that, like literally down to the depths of your core, the things that will populate in your life is undescribable.
Undescribable. And you could have never, ever planned for it. You know what I mean? Like you could never have sat down and go, here's my goal and here's the plan to get there. Like what comes through in the way that it comes through, you could have never masterminded from your own consciousness. Like that's the piece of we've got to stop micromanaging the universe. The how
Yes.
is not where we need to be spending our focus. The why and the being is where we need to spend our focus. And when I was in that moment of feeling like I was literally banging my head against the wall for a year with that first business, the reason it started to feel more and more and more intense was because that was life in the universe trying to get my attention, like, and so the level of intensity I find is an accumulation of missed opportunities to realign back to that truth.
Hmm. Yeah. And something that's popping up too for me is like, I feel like sometimes we our human self wants to like strategize things almost to death. Like we have to know every step, we have to know every way, we have to know the whole plan, we have to know like how it's all going to come and when it's going to come and all this. Where really, if you go into a place of surrendering
Mm-hmm.
and believing
Mm-hmm.
and acting, that stuff will literally, I mean, like we just said, it will literally show up at a speed and at an alignment, like the perfection of things that show up. Like these are the things that I've always been looking for. Oh my gosh, where have they been? Oh, I mean, it's a reflection of you. It really is.
It 100%. And I love that you said surrender. And in my world and in my framework that's sort of been, inspired through me in this work is the way I see it is there are 4 levels of surrender. And I'll say them quick. I know we're probably coming to the end of our time here, but the 4 levels that we need to surrender to is number 1, and we need to surrender being right. And that's really aligned with possibility. That's the first place we need to start. So like a lot of times when we're stuck, if again, it's hard to do it in a vacuum on your own, but if you look at the stories and the narratives you're telling yourself, there's a lot that this is the way it always is, or, a lot of subconscious, I'm right. It is hard to make money. That's something that a lot of us are clutching to. We are obsessed with being right, that it's hard to make money. So the first surrender that we need to make is rightness. We need to give up being right. And if we can give up being right, then the universe goes, thank you. Now I can do my job. The next level of surrender is control. We need to stop micromanaging. We talked about that. The next level of surrender is the known. We need to embrace the unknown, which is a really difficult part because that's neurologically hardwired into the oldest part of our brain, that fight and flight and freeze. So we need to embrace the known and embrace patience. And then the last thing that we need to surrender is independence, which is like the deeper level work. I work with people, in terms of how it actually looks like. We work through those layers of surrender, and surrendering that last level of independence is stepping into a place of true co-creation. If, your audience is familiar with that term.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that it's not just like a one, just like, okay, I'm going to throw my hands up and whatever happens, happens. It's being intentional about working through these things and being aware of them in the moment.
Yep. And I think that's the beautiful part of all of this and being an entrepreneur. I mean, I've always said from day one, there is nothing like entrepreneurship to squeeze the shit out of you.
That's a true story.
It is a massive, massive mirror for self-development. Massive.
Yes.
Not that, other professions can't be that way, but you are going to learn so much about yourself on the entrepreneurial path. And to me, there's just so much beauty and grace in that journey, or those infinite destinations, that in and of itself, there's a moment to step into the receiving cycle. So it really doesn't matter where you enter into in terms of doing, receiving. Doing's hard to enter into. I wouldn't take that route, but there are infinite things to receive. We could look around, our desk right now and look at an infinite number of things to feel gracious for. That will get you back into a place of reinforcing the being that you need to be, which is why people harbor on gratitude so much, because it leads to being a person of truth and abundance.
Absolutely. So one of the last things I want to ask you is about get light, take flight, creating the framework for optimal operation in your business. Yeah. I think that's something that everyone is really striving for. And I think a lot of what we've talked about today really, really is drawn back into that. But what advice do you have on creating an optimal operation in your business?
So everything we talked about is massively important. You can classify all of the work we just described into those 2 motions, as I guess I would see them. when we talk about getting light, that is clearing away the sabotage, the resistance, the getting in your own way work. So that can look like a variety of things for people. They could be working with coaches. They could be using tools like hypnosis, perhaps meditation. The biggest tool that you have is to start analyzing your triggers and being aware of what's triggering you. So when you see the bank account that's low, or if you look around and you're seeing certain clients are triggering you, I find that's a really excellent place to start, because anything that's getting a reaction out of you is, again, one of those moments to realign back to your truth. So the question is, why is this such a trigger for you? What is this? That's a data harvesting moment. So the getting light is stripping away all the untruths of who we really are, and our work processes, which is making money is hard, or I have to work 80-hour weeks to get there, or no one supports me. Like, what are the narratives and stories that are actually making you heavy? So we can't really get the impact and the results if we're heavy. I mean, you can still hit milestones, but whew, is it going to feel like pushing a boulder up the hill? So if we get light, we start stripping away those layers, getting clarity as to, oh, I'm doing things because I'm motivated by achievement, not because I'm actually attached to a why. You can then make the change necessary. The problem is, a lot of people enter into on the self-development path is it's addicting in and of itself to do the self-achievement, to do the self-development work that we're talking about. That inherently is also a form of achievement. And so if you're an achiever, be careful of falling into the achiever trap within your own self-development, which looks like going, oh, I just had this massive breakthrough. I just connected this childhood thing that happened to why I fear wealth. And you have that burst of insight and breakthrough, and it feels really good. You feel lighter. So then you go, okay, I'm going to keep going lighter, peeling away these layers. And you're treating it like an onion with gold in the center. And you keep thinking that if I just peel away enough layers, I will finally get to that gold, or then everything will just happen automatically. And I mistakenly found myself in this habit of, okay, I just got lighter. What's the next thing to work on myself with, right? And I was, getting light will create space for things to come through. But again, it's not necessarily sustainable, because you still have to take flight. So the getting light is clearing that stuff away, but the results probably aren't going to come in to the extent that they are. And this is great if there's anyone in the audience that's like, I've been doing this work and I feel better, and inside I feel better, but I'm not getting the money and I'm not getting the clients. Then your work now is the second motion, which is the taking flight. And that's the actual identity shift, meaning, okay, you want $500,000. You need to know how to step into a being that already has the $500,000. And that's the taking flight aspect of it, is the identity shift that needs to happen on an internal level.
Amazing. Mic drop. And that's how you do that. Gosh, Shauna, this has been so insightful. I feel like we could probably talk for 3 more days. But, I just think that these messages are so important, because for so long, business has been taught in a very specific way, but I feel really fortunate that we're living in an era where business looks different, and people and energy can be combined to create really amazing things and to really live with purpose. So thank you for what you do in the world, because you're helping to shift leaders that are ultimately affecting other people.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell that I absolutely love it. I'm right where I need to be in it, and I can say that the result of all of this work that we've done, I have never felt more satisfied and fulfilled in my entire life with my work. And I'm doing 80% less of the actual to-dos than I ever was. So, if anything, I hope that people can sort of maybe they can borrow some of this energy that I know comes through, because it's a really amazing place to be at, and it looks nothing like I thought it needed to look like. And thank goodness for that.
and what a beautiful message in its own. I'm curious, to close this out, what does gutsy mean to you?
Being yourself. Being yourself. Gutsy to me means having the courage to show up as who you really are. And, on the general level, we're all infinite possibility and, infinite love and whatever you want to say there. But we all then have the beautiful will to also specifically be unique in our own way. And so I think being gutsy has nothing to do with like these massive risks and all of that, so much as it has to do with allowing yourself to be who you are. And beyond that, what's even more gutsy to me is allowing other people to see it as well.
True story. Shauna, how can our listeners connect with you? Where can we find you?
I'm Shauna VanBogart everywhere. So Instagram is my predominant hangout. ShaunaVanBogart.com, which is, depending on when listeners are listening to this, I'm in a massive rebrand. So you might be seeing the old site now. But yeah, I'm Shauna VanBogart everywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Join me for this Thursday's Power Back as we talk a little bit about the past. The past has brought a lot of things. It's been an important part of our journey, but the best way to prevent the negative parts of our past is to not repeat the past. Until then, follow the Gutsy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And for more Gutsy Insight, follow me personally on Instagram at @LauraOra. See you next time.